Friends, Josh Hescott here with the Hescott Project. Hey, this weekend, me and you and me are going to be building this stylish headboard inspired by mid-century modern design, which I always gravitate towards. It's my favorite design era. I'm using ash, walnut, cherry, white oak, which I wish would have been maple, but my local lumberyard just didn't have any. I was going for a color gradation here with these little spindles. You do not have to do that. You can adapt this to fit any wood choice or species that you like to work with, but that's what we went with here. We're using very simple joinery. I'll show you all that on a table saw, maybe a few other tools incorporated, but you can, like I said, knock this out in a weekend and have fun doing it. So let's get making some sawdust and make a mess and end up with this. Well, you guys and gals know the drill here. Before every woodworking project starts, you got to break down the lumber. Bigger pieces of material into smaller pieces of material, get things flat, get things square, then you can kind of start out on the right foot. Excited to grab a SawStop Professional cabinet saw into my shop for the first time. Used one at a local high school, and the safety features were pretty superb, so I was excited to switch from my old Delta Unisaw to this table. I got mine outfitted with the inline router table and the lift. I think that's gonna make things pretty handy. I had an old cast iron wing on my Delta Unisaw and worked out great, but I'd never had a lift, so I'm excited to use this. And I've never had overarm dust collection, so boy, this was great. Very little dust, as you can see, came off during those cuts. Okay, we just finished up milling some material. You guys just saw that. I'm using ash. Now the dimensions are sort of arbitrary, but if you want to know, I got 2 1/4 by 1 3/4 thickness wise for the rails. Now that thickness could change right now. That's just going to be like artistic discretion, right? I'm also doing some white oak, some cherry, some walnut. You guys see me mill that up. That's going to be for the rails or the stiles or you know what, don't hold me to what any of this stuff is called, but whatever fits between the frame for the headboard. Going to be a mid-century modern design, like we mentioned. I'm going for like a color gradation. I don't know if it's going to look good, but I'm hoping it does. Going to do a cool little shape, mid-century modern shape, that I'm going to show you how to do a template, and we're going to use the router table. The whole point is we're not going to use super fancy tools, table saws, routers, things of that nature. Going to keep it pretty darn simple. Bridle joints, splines, glue, maybe a brad nail. I have no idea. Norm Abram used brad nail, so don't yell at me. I think it's okay. Anywho's, let's move on to the next step, and I'll figure out what I was doing next. Very rarely do I use plans. Pretty much never. I just use the leftover parts and pieces to mark heights and dimensions, and that's what I'm kind of doing here. You can see here I use the offcuts to get the height for the cut on this bridle joint. Kind of makes everything, I don't know, foolproof for me anyway. I think it's a good practice. Usually once I get the 2 outer lines of the cut done, I'll just hog out the middle. Take your time. It goes pretty quick and should come out pretty clean. I'll then use that cut piece to mark my dimensions for the other corresponding joint. And once things have been marked, it's pretty straightforward. You'll just take it over to your table saw again and, start paring away material. Everything should fit pretty snug for this part here. I was going to use pins, but everything fits so well, I really didn't have to do that, so I decided not to. We got this all cut up, we got the bridle joints done. I think we can go ahead and get this all glued up and clamps. I will probably pin this, maybe brass, I don't know. I'm noodling on it, but you can do whatever you want to do. Like I said, these are bridle joints. You guys watched me cut them on the table saw. Super easy joint to do, and I think overall it's going to lend a nice look. I always like when the exposed joinery is done on the ends. We'll get it all up to snuff. We're looking pretty good. We're on the right track. Let's go ahead and figure out the measurements that we need between here and here. We're keeping this build super simple. This is something you can knock out in a weekend. We're just gonna kind of build like, when you're building like a deck railing or something like that. We'll get the measurement from here to here. We'll go ahead and figure out our spacing on our spindles or whatever you wanna call them. And we're gonna sandwich in between 2 other strips of wood, and we're gonna slide it in here, screw it in from the underside and the bottom, plug the holes, not too shabby, if I do say so myself. All right, onward and upward. Let's get going on this next part. I know for a lot of people, the glue up process can make people feel a little bit anxious or rushed, but it's better to just take your time. Accuracy over speed. I'm using Titebond 3 here. It gives you a little bit more open time. I find I make way less mistakes if I'm just, taking my time. I think if you rush and hurry, that's when things can kind of go wrong. Once you have everything glued up, I just simply threw a 1/4 inch round over on the inside and outside, and of course, sanded. That's the funnest part of every project, I'm pretty sure. The next part of this project is the balusters or the metal spindles of the headboard. Now, I chose to use a design kind of based on a mid-century modern aesthetic, which I enjoy. You can choose any kind of style that you want, but mine is kind of a take on a Broyhill Brasilia pattern, I believe from the 1950s. So I just sketched it onto this hardboard, made it as accurate as I could, and then I can use that as a template for all of the pieces I milled up earlier. Things then should be pretty darn accurate or the same. At least that's the goal as I'm cutting these. Now, if you have a CNC, you could choose to use a CNC and do the same thing, but making a template is, I think, a good thing to learn. Being able to change bits this easy and above the table has been pretty nice. Using a 1/8 inch round over here just to ease the edges. And of course after that, you'll have to sand. And sand a little bit more. So when I've made all these balusters or spindles, I made them all a little bit long on purpose so that I could then go back and trim them to fit the space in between my frame. I just simply lined them up and stuck them down with some double stick tape and made a quick cut through them. I mentioned earlier that I was going for a color gradation, and this is just me laying things out to see what I think looks nice. I'm spacing things roughly 6 inches apart. Pre-drilling here just so we don't split the wood and have a catastrophe. Since I will be using screws, I'm just using a 1/4 inch Forstner bit here to allow for some plugs later in the build. Again, just doing some pre-drilling so I don't have issues with any splits. Best practice is just to use a drill bit that's smaller than the diameter of the screw that you're going to use. I was pretty happy with the fit here. I want it to be nice and snug and hold itself in when I press fit it. And you can see here that it does nicely. Driving some 1.5 trim head screws to anchor things together. And then time to cut some plugs. Getting these 1/4 inch plugs out of their little homes is always kind of fun. As far as glue up, I'm using Titebond translucent because I like that it dries clear. Another good practice is to make sure you're aligning your grain with the piece that you're putting it in. And then just tap away. Leave a little bit of space when you're trimming the plug and then just sand it down. You'll mar the wood up quite a bit less and it doesn't take that much longer. Going to use an oil wax finish. I prefer Osmo. There are other brands out there that are very popular and very good, but Osmo always seems to do well for me. You can apply as many coats as you want. I'll generally do 2 to 3. This is a satin. Preferably I would use gloss, which isn't a high gloss, but to be honest, I ran out and this is what I had on hand. I think it still looks pretty good and the colors pop with the walnut and the cherry and even the white oak. Applying the finish to a project is not necessarily my favorite thing to do, but I really do like seeing the colors of the wood start to pop and come alive. I hope you guys have had a good time watching this video. I had fun building it and I think you should try making one of your own. Thanks for watching.